I remember standing there, staring at the sea of expectant faces. My name is Victor Martin, and I'm 32 years old. I live in a small farming town in eastern Washington, and I've been an agricultural engineer for the past 8 years. The local co-op had asked me to share some personal lessons on professional integrity, and though I'd done my best to prepare, my throat was dry as a hayfield. The microphone squealed as I stepped up. "Thanks, everyone," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'd like to share a story about choices and about trust." My story wasn't just about me, though. It was about Eliza, my wife. We'd been married for 2 years, and for most of that time, we were building a life that felt as solid as the soil we worked. Our dream was simple, a quiet life, kids playing under the orchard trees, a place where work ended when the sun went down and laughter picked up around the dinner table. That was the plan, at least. But plans are only as strong as the promises behind them. Eliza was a vibrant soul, always brimming with ideas and energy. I still remember how she looked at our first real harvest together, hands in the dirt, eyes shining like she'd found the purpose she'd been chasing. That's what pulled me to her in the first place, her passion. But passion can be a double-edged blade. I paused and took a sip of water, my fingers tight around the glass. Eliza had a complicated history with chance, I said carefully, trying not to let my voice crack. She was never one for poker nights or office pools. No, she liked the real thing. Slot machines. Roulette. Anything that hummed with the promise of more. A couple of heads in the audience nodded. Everyone knows someone with that kind of itch. I remembered the first time she confessed it to me. We'd been engaged only 3 months, sitting at a diner on the edge of town. She held my hand across the table, her thumb tracing circles on my knuckles. "I used to play," she said softly, staring into her coffee. "A lot. When I was stressed, I'd just disappear into it. I almost lost everything once. Back then, I told her I understood. Love is supposed to be patient, after all. And she promised me it was in the past. It was in the past, or so I told myself. We built a life that was steady and routine, waking before dawn to tend the fields and falling asleep to the scent of rain and warm earth. Our friends called us the boring couple, always together, always predictable. But there was comfort in that. Beneath the routine, though, was a silent compromise, her vow to avoid even the smallest risk. She promised me she'd stop. "No cards, no dice, nothing," she said one evening, her voice firm. "Not even a harmless game with friends. I'm done with all of it." And I believed her. Because when you're married to someone, believing is part of the job. I shifted my weight at the podium, letting my gaze wander over the audience. "We all have our lines in the sand," I said. "And we all have to decide what to do when those lines are crossed." I didn't tell them yet about how Eliza's promises would eventually come undone. I wasn't ready to share that part. But I wanted them to know the beginning, the hopeful part, the part where love seemed like enough to build a whole world on. "That's the lesson I wanted to start with," I said, my voice soft. "The lesson that a quiet life can be built on fragile dreams, if you're not careful." A few people in the front row looked down, maybe thinking of their own silent compromises. And for a second, I let myself remember the days when it felt like Eliza and I could weather anything. Back then, we were just two people with dirt under our nails and the future in our eyes. It was a rainy Thursday morning when Eliza got the invitation. I had just come in from checking the irrigation valves, my boots still wet, when she met me at the door with a bright, excited smile. "Look," she said, holding up the fancy envelope like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Chloe wants me to come to Vegas with her. She's hosting some big wellness event, retreat and risk, or something like that." I remember wiping my hands on my jeans and giving her a look. Vegas? Chloe? My mind was already spinning. Chloe was Eliza's younger sister, always chasing some new scheme, always the life of the party. I'd never trusted Chloe's idea of a good time. In Vegas, it was everything Eliza had promised to avoid. "Vegas, huh?" I said slowly, feeling my stomach tighten. "You know that's a lot of temptation." Eliza rolled her eyes and dropped the invitation on the table. "Victor, it's not like that. Chloe's launching this new wellness brand. There's going to be yoga, meditation, organic cooking classes. It's not about the casinos." I looked at her and forced a small smile, though my mind was screaming. She caught the worry in my eyes and stepped closer, resting her hands on my chest. "Hey," she said, her voice softening. "I know what you're thinking, but I'm not that person anymore. I promised you, remember?" I nodded slowly. "I remember." She pressed her lips together and looked up at me with those big, earnest eyes. "I swear to you, Victor, no gambling, no drinking, nothing like that. It's just a chance for me to support Chloe and to get away for a weekend." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. Because trust isn't just about what you say, it's about what you let yourself believe, even when your gut tells you otherwise. So I told myself it was okay. I helped her pack that night, folding her soft cotton dresses and slipping them into her suitcase, even though every fold felt like a goodbye to the life we'd built together. We talked about the baby. We had just found out she was pregnant, And there was this quiet excitement in the way she held her hand to her belly, like she could already feel the little heartbeat inside. "You'll call me every night?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She laughed lightly, zipping up her bag. "Of course. I'll be too busy getting my chakras aligned to get into trouble." The next morning, I drove her to the airport. It was still dark when we left, the sky streaked with purple and gray. She chatted about Chloe's plans, how she'd booked them in some fancy spa hotel off the strip, how there were supposed to be sound baths and crystal healings. She made it sound so innocent, so far from the flashing neon lights and the slot machines she used to love. But in the back of my mind, all I could see were the headlines about Vegas. The easy money. The quick slip back into old habits. When we got to the terminal, she turned to me and gave me a long, searching look. "You trust me, right?" she asked, her voice so small in the cavernous echo of the departures hall. I swallowed hard and nodded. "I do," I said. And in that moment, I meant it. She leaned in and kissed me, slow and lingering. Then she picked up her suitcase and walked into the terminal, her silhouette shrinking in the distance until she was gone. I watched her go, my chest tight with a mix of hope and dread. Trust means believing, I told myself as I walked back to the truck. Even when it's hard. Even when you're terrified. As I drove home, the road stretching out in front of me like a promise, I told myself she'd come back to me the same woman who left. But deep down, I couldn't silence that voice whispering in my ear. What if she doesn't? When Eliza came back from Vegas, she looked radiant. That's the only word I could think of. Her cheeks were flushed like she'd been basking in desert sunsets. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and her smile, God, her smile was so bright it almost hurt to look at. "Victor," she said as she dropped her suitcase by the door, wrapping her arms around me. "It was incredible. You wouldn't believe the desert at sunrise, or the spa treatments. They had these rose quartz facials, can you believe that?" I hugged her back, but something felt off. Her skin was warm and soft, but there was a chill in the way she held me, like she was only half there. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. She was tired, that was all. She just had a long flight and needed to settle back in. We spent that evening on the couch, her telling me stories about yoga classes under the stars and juice cleanses that tasted like grass. She laughed about how Chloe's launch party had been full of influencers and that she'd been the only one in flip-flops. "It's so weird, Vic," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "All these people chasing wellness, and half of them were more stressed out than me." I smiled at her, but the smile didn't quite reach my eyes. I wanted to ask her outright, "Did you go to the casinos? Did you even step foot in one?" But the words wouldn't come out. Because if I asked, it would mean I didn't trust her. And I had to trust her, didn't I? That night in bed, she curled into me, her hand resting on my chest like a question she wasn't ready to ask. But when I tried to kiss her, she turned her head away, mumbling about being tired, about the flight and the time difference. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathing. I told myself it was the pregnancy. We had just confirmed it before she left, 2 little pink lines on a plastic stick that changed everything. She'd been so happy, so sure we were finally going to be a family. That had to be it, I told myself. Hormones. Fatigue. A long weekend in a place that probably wore her out. But in the quiet of that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was holding something back. Like there was a wall between us, invisible but solid. Over the next few days, the distance only grew. She was all smiles and soft laughter, but when I reached for her, she flinched like she'd forgotten I was there. When I asked about the baby, she brushed it off. "Oh, I'm just a little tired, that's all. It's normal." But it wasn't normal. Not for us. We'd always been in sync, our lives braided together so tightly I couldn't tell where her dreams ended and mine began. Now it felt like she was living in a place I couldn't reach. I remember one morning, sitting across from her at the breakfast table, watching her stir her coffee over and over. "Eliza," I said carefully, "you've seemed distant since you got back. Is everything okay?" She looked up, startled, like she hadn't even realized I was there. "Of course," she said quickly, her smile too bright. "Just tired, you know? And maybe a little queasy. Early pregnancy stuff." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm so glad you trust me, Victor," she said, her voice soft. "I promise, everything's fine." I squeezed back and forced a smile, but inside, doubt was starting to coil like a snake in my gut. I wanted so badly to believe her. To believe that nothing had happened in Vegas except for sunrise yoga and fancy juices. That she was still the woman who had promised me a life of honesty and love. But that night, lying next to her in the dark, I couldn't silence the voice in my head whispering that her stories were too smooth, too perfect. And the hardest part was that I didn't know if I was imagining it, or if I was finally seeing the truth. It was 2 weeks after Eliza's return when it happened. I was in my office, finishing up the quarterly crop report, when my phone buzzed with a text from Matt, one of the guys I worked with at the co-op. We didn't usually text about personal stuff, so I frowned and opened it. "You okay, man? I saw the footage." Didn't know if you'd heard. My hands went cold. The footage? I typed back. What are you talking about? My heart pounded as I watched the typing dots pop up, disappear, and then reappear. Check your messages. I'm sending it. A moment later, a private message pinged on my phone. One of those quick video clips that vanish if you don't save them. My thumb hovered over the play button. I didn't want to see it. God, I didn't want to see it. But I had to. I pressed play. It was shaky, obviously shot on someone's phone inside a dimly lit casino lounge. There was laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. The camera panned across a group of women at a low table, drinks and chips scattered in front of them. And there, right in the middle of it all, was Eliza. She was laughing, full-bodied, head thrown back, eyes sparkling. She clinked glasses with the women around her, her smile wide and bright. My heart stopped. And then, like a punch to the gut, I saw her lean into a man sitting next to her. He was handsome, confident, and he didn't look like some random stranger. Their lips met, slow and deliberate, as the women around them cheered and raised their glasses. I couldn't breathe. I watched it twice, 3 times, just to be sure my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. But it was real. The video didn't lie. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My hands were trembling so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I thought about her promises, the quiet nights we'd spent talking about building a life for our baby, the way she'd looked me in the eye and sworn she was done with all that. No cards, no dice, nothing. And here she was, in a casino lounge, kissing a stranger like the life we'd built didn't even exist. I called Matt immediately. Where did you get this? My voice sounded strange in my ears, calm but hollow. He hesitated. Someone from town was in Vegas for a conference. They recognized Eliza and, well, it made the rounds. I'm sorry, man. I didn't remember much of what I said after that. I just sat there, the video replaying in my mind, over and over. Eliza's laughter, the clinking of glasses, that kiss. I didn't know what hurt more, the gambling, the drinking, or the fact that she'd lied to me with such easy grace. When I got home that night, she was in the kitchen, humming softly as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She looked up and smiled, and for a split second, I almost pretended nothing had changed. But the video was burned into my brain. Eliza, I said, my voice rough. We need to talk. She turned, the knife still in her hand, her smile faltering. What's wrong? I pulled out my phone and set it on the counter, the video queued up. I want you to watch this, I said. She hesitated, glancing at the phone. Then she reached out and pressed play. Her face went pale as the laughter and music filled the kitchen. When the video ended, there was silence. She set the knife down and gripped the counter like she needed it to stand. Victor, she whispered. I can explain. I shook my head. Can you? Because I've been listening to your promises for 2 years, Eliza. And this isn't what you promised. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and then finally said, it was just a dare. Chloe's friends, they dared me to do it. I didn't even know his name, Victor. It was just a stupid, drunk moment. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the way she said it, so quick and rehearsed, it didn't sound like the truth. It sounded like someone who'd had 2 weeks to figure out what to say. I looked at her and saw a stranger. And for the first time since she'd left for Vegas, I let myself wonder what else she'd been lying about. I need some air, I said, stepping away from the counter. I walked out into the yard, the night cool against my skin, and I stood there for a long time, staring up at the dark sky. The baby, our baby, everything we'd built together, it felt like it was slipping through my fingers, as fragile and fleeting as her promises. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in the tool shed loft, staring up at the wooden beams, listening to the crickets and the distant rustle of the wind through the orchard. I'd brought an old blanket and a pillow, and it was just enough to keep the chill away. But nothing could warm the cold ache in my chest. I didn't go back to the house until dawn. When I walked in, Eliza was already in the kitchen, her hair pulled back, her eyes puffy and red. She looked at me like she didn't know what to say, and maybe she didn't. I didn't either. I sat down across from her at the table, the video still playing on a loop in my mind. Tell me the truth, I said, my voice flat. All of it. No more half-truths or excuses. She swallowed hard, twisting a paper napkin in her hands. It was just drinks, Victor, she said, her voice shaking. A dare. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't gamble, I didn't. You kissed him, I cut in, my voice low. You kissed him like you'd forgotten I even existed. She flinched, tears filling her eyes. I was drunk, okay? Chloe kept ordering drinks and I got carried away. It didn't mean anything. But you promised me, I said quietly, feeling my voice crack. You promised me you were done with that life. You looked me in the eye and said you wouldn't even play a game of cards with friends. You promised me, Eliza. I know, she whispered. I know what I promised. And I broke it. I'm so sorry. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. The distance between us felt like a canyon, too wide to cross. I wanted to close it. I wanted to believe her. But every word out of her mouth felt like it was dripping in old lies. "Eliza," I said, my voice shaking, "you're pregnant. We have a baby on the way. You were supposed to be taking care of yourself, of us. And instead, you went back to that place." She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. "I didn't mean to," she cried. "I swear to you, Victor, it was just a stupid night. I didn't gamble. I didn't touch a single slot machine. I just wanted to feel free. Just for a second." I leaned back in my chair, feeling like I was floating outside my own body. "You wanted to feel free," I repeated softly, "while I was here, holding on to every promise you made." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "Please don't hate me," she whispered. "Please. I'm begging you." I didn't hate her. That was the worst part. I loved her. But that love felt like a weight now, a burden I didn't know how to carry. I stood up and walked to the sink, staring out at the orchard beyond the window. The sun was just rising, the sky streaked with pink and gold, and for a second, it felt like the world was mocking me. Here was a perfect morning, and all I could feel was the collapse of everything we'd built. "I'm going to sleep in the tool shed for a while," I said quietly. "I can't be in here with you right now." She sobbed harder, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I walked out the back door and let it slam shut behind me, the sound echoing in the quiet dawn. That night, as I lay in the tool shed again, I thought about all the ways trust can die slowly, like a crack that deepens over years, or all at once, like a branch snapping in a storm. And I thought about how love doesn't always save you. Sometimes, it's the very thing that keeps you tied to a sinking ship. It didn't take long for the video to spread. Chloe's wellness launch had been crawling with influencers and wannabe gurus, people whose lives revolved around clicks and clout. One of them, some self-styled relationship coach named Kelly Powers, had apparently caught wind of the footage and decided it was the perfect cautionary tale. She posted it on her channel, edited, spliced with commentary, and uploaded for the world to see. "This is what happens," she said dramatically in the opening shot, "when trust and boundaries are ignored in a relationship." Eliza's laughing face, the clinking glasses, the kiss with the stranger, it was all there, stripped of context, reduced to a viral scandal. Within hours, I could feel the shift. The co-op, the town, even the grocery store, everywhere I went, I felt the weight of eyes on me. Whispers followed me down the aisles. Pity and curiosity in every glance. At work, Matt pulled me aside. "Hey," he said quietly, "just so you know, the video's all over Facebook. People are talking." I nodded, my jaw tight. "Thanks for letting me know. I'd always been a private man. Our marriage, our plans, our baby, I'd wanted all of it to stay safe inside the walls of our home. But now there were no walls. Just cracks and spotlights and strangers dissecting our lives like it was some twisted form of entertainment." Eliza didn't leave the house for days. She'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at her phone, reading the comments. I could hear her sobbing at night, muffling the sound in her pillow. But I couldn't comfort her. My own hurt was too raw. The worst part wasn't the gossip or the judgment. It was the loss of something deeper, the quiet certainty that used to be the foundation of our marriage. We'd built our life on trust, and now it felt like every brick had been stolen in the night. Chloe called one evening, her voice tight and nervous. "I'm so sorry, Victor," she said. "I never thought it would get out like this." I didn't say anything. What was there to say? The damage was done. The launch party was supposed to be that weekend, an event we'd planned to attend together, celebrating Chloe's big step forward. But neither of us could face it now. I texted Chloe, "We won't be coming. Please understand." She replied a few minutes later, "Of course. I'm sorry again." That was it. No grand explanations, no attempts to make it better. Just a quiet acceptance that we'd become the cautionary tale everyone was whispering about. Around town, people looked at me differently. Some with pity, others with a kind of morbid curiosity. In the co-op break room, I overheard someone say, "I guess even the strongest marriages have secrets." I wanted to shout at them, to tell them they didn't know the half of it. That they didn't know the years of promises, the quiet nights spent planning for a child, the trust that had once been the bedrock of everything we were. But I didn't say a word. Because what could I say that would make any of it real again? I came home from work one evening and found Eliza sitting at the kitchen table, her phone dark in front of her. "They're still commenting," she said softly. "Still sharing it." I stood there for a moment, my hands in my pockets. "They will," I said. "For a while." She looked up at me, her eyes red. "Do you hate me?" I thought about it for a long moment. "No," I said finally. "I don't hate you, but I don't know how to trust you either." She nodded like she already knew. And in that silence, I realized that was the real scandal. Not the video, not the whispers, but the simple, quiet collapse of everything we'd built together. A week after the video went viral, Eliza came to me with puffy eyes and a trembling voice. "I want to try counseling," she said. I know I messed up, but I can't stand how far apart we've become. I was so tired of the endless explanations, the gut punch of seeing our life turned into a viral sideshow. But I agreed. Maybe because part of me still wanted to believe there was a way back. Or maybe because I wanted to hear her say the truth out loud in front of someone else. We found a therapist in town, a woman named Marjorie with a calm voice and a habit of tilting her head when she was listening. Our first session was in a small office with soft chairs and pale green walls. Eliza's fingers were clenched so tight in her lap that her knuckles were white. Marjorie asked the usual questions. What happened? How did we feel about it? Eliza's voice shook as she talked about that night. How she'd felt trapped, restless, desperate to prove she was still her own person. She said it was just a moment of weakness, that she didn't want to hurt me, that she'd never meant for it to go that far. I feel so guilty, she said, her voice cracking. I can't stop thinking about it. I see your face every time I close my eyes. I looked at her, and for a second, I almost reached out. But then I remembered how she'd looked in that video, how easily she'd laughed, how easily she'd kissed a stranger. And my hand fell back to my side. Marjorie looked at me. Victor, what about you? How are you feeling? I took a deep breath. Numb, I said. Like something inside me died. And I don't know how to bring it back. Marjorie nodded slowly. Sometimes, after a betrayal, there's a grief that starts even before you realize the relationship is over. I didn't say anything, because that was exactly what it felt like, grief. Like I was already mourning something I couldn't name. We kept going to therapy for a few weeks, but nothing changed. Eliza cried, apologized, talked about how much she wanted to fix things. But I felt like I was floating above it all, watching two strangers try to glue together something that was already broken. Then came the final blow. It was a Thursday evening. I'd just come back from the co-op, covered in dust and sweat, when I found her in the living room, curled up in the corner of the couch, her face buried in her hands. I didn't have to ask what was wrong. I just knew. It's gone, she whispered when she finally looked up. The baby. I lost it. I felt my knees buckle, but I managed to sit beside her. She was sobbing so hard her whole body shook, and I wrapped my arms around her because even after everything, I couldn't stand to see her like that. But inside, something felt empty. Like the grief I was supposed to feel had already been spent on everything else we'd lost. I'm so sorry, she kept repeating, her voice hoarse. I'm so sorry, Victor. I stroked her hair, murmuring the only words I could think of. But in my mind, I was somewhere else, standing in that tool shed, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly our marriage had turned into something I didn't recognize. That night, when she finally fell asleep, I sat in the dark and thought about the baby we'd never meet, about the future we'd planned, gone in a heartbeat. And I realized that I'd already made my decision. The next morning, I told her I wanted a divorce. She didn't say anything, just stared at me like I'd just spoken in a language she didn't understand. Maybe she thought the miscarriage would pull us back together. Maybe she thought shared grief could heal the rift that betrayal had torn open. But for me, it was the final proof that some things can't be fixed. That the loss had started long before that night in the casino lounge. And that the only way forward was to let it all go. A week after I told Eliza I wanted a divorce, I went down to the county courthouse and filed the paperwork. I didn't tell her I was going to do it. I just did. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I told her she didn't have to fight me on anything. I didn't want revenge or a drawn-out battle. I just wanted peace. She sat on the porch steps when I told her, staring at the ground like it might give her an answer. You're really going to leave, she said softly. I nodded. Yeah, I think it's the only thing left for me to do. She didn't argue. Maybe she'd finally seen it in my face, the way I'd stopped asking questions, stopped trying to fill the silence between us. I packed up my things over the next few days, moving boxes out to my truck in the early mornings when the town was still asleep. The farm had always been our dream, apple trees heavy with fruit in the fall, rows of sunflowers that turned their faces to the sun. But walking through it now felt like wandering through someone else's life. So I left it all to her. She could sell it, keep it, burn it to the ground. I didn't care anymore. On my last night there, I slept in the tool shed one final time. I lay there listening to the wind rattling the old window panes, remembering the nights we'd spent planning our future. It felt like a lifetime ago. I woke up at dawn, made myself a cup of coffee, and watched the sun rise over the orchard one more time. Then I got in my truck and drove away. I didn't tell anyone at the co-op that I was leaving. I sent an email to the board, thanking them for the years of work and letting them know I was moving on. A week later, I took a job as a consultant for a farm tech startup in Spokane, somewhere far enough from home that the whispers wouldn't follow me. The first few weeks in the city were strange. My apartment was small and smelled like fresh paint, and I didn't know any of my neighbors. But there was something comforting in the anonymity. No one here cared about the video, the scandal, the baby we'd lost. I spent my evenings walking the quiet streets, breathing in the unfamiliar air. Some nights I'd find a small bar and sit there nursing a beer, just watching the world go by. There was a stillness in it that I hadn't felt in years. One night, I took out my phone and scrolled through old photos, Eliza's smile, the orchard in bloom, the ultrasound picture we'd taped to the fridge. For a moment, I thought I'd made a mistake, that maybe I should have fought harder, tried longer. But then I thought about the silence between us those last few months. The way her laughter in that video had sounded so free, like she'd already left me long before I walked away. I realized then that letting go wasn't failure. It was the only way to save myself. When people asked why I left, I just told them the truth. I needed a fresh start. And the truth was enough. That was about 5 years ago now. I've settled in Spokane, working with farmers and researchers on new irrigation systems. It's good, honest work, nothing flashy, but it pays the bills and keeps my hands busy. I rent a small place near the river, and most days it feels like enough. I don't talk about Eliza much anymore. When people ask about my past, I just say I was married once, and that it didn't work out. Nobody pushes me for details. Maybe they see it in my face, the line where I've drawn the story and the line where I won't cross. But tonight, I'm telling the story because I was asked to. The leadership conference I'm speaking at is all about decision-making and personal ethics. They wanted a personal angle. So I told them I'd share a story about trust, about how sometimes the hardest decision you'll ever make is to walk away from someone you love. I'm standing in front of my laptop in my apartment, the video call blinking back at me. There's a dozen faces watching, some bored, some curious, all of them strangers. And I tell them how it started. A young couple in a small town, building a life on dreams and compromises. How it fell apart, one lie at a time. I see their faces flicker with discomfort when I mention the video. The baby. The betrayal. Some of them shift in their chairs, glancing away like they're intruding on something too raw. But I don't mind. Because this isn't about them. It's about me finally being able to say it out loud. I finish the story and close my notes. For a moment, there's silence on the call. Then the moderator clears his throat and says, "Thank you, Victor. That was powerful." I nod, and I mean it. Not because it feels good to share, but because it feels like I've finally put it down. Like I've finally stopped carrying it alone. I lean back in my chair as the questions start coming in. People want to know how I moved on, how I found the courage to let go. And I tell them the truth. Letting go doesn't happen all at once. It's 1,000 tiny choices, getting up every morning, making coffee, going to work, learning to live in the quiet. Before we wrap up, the moderator asks me one last question. "Victor, after everything you went through, do you think trust can ever be rebuilt?" I think about it for a second, then shake my head. "Not always," I say. "Sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away, to protect yourself from further harm, and to let go of the hope that things will ever be what they were." I see the moderator nod, but I don't wait for his next question. I end the call and close my laptop. The room is quiet again, and I sit there for a moment, staring at the empty screen. Then I get up, pour myself a cup of coffee, and stand at the window watching the sun sink behind the city skyline. I'm not bitter anymore, just clear. I know now that love isn't always enough. That sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let go. And as I watch the last of the daylight fade, I feel something that's been missing for a long time. Peace.